I have an analogy for that. And it's walking down the street, whistling, enjoying the weather. Nowadays, you're just turned down and texting on the phone. And then, bam, getting smacked on the side of the head with a 2x4. That's what's coming to these people, Jim.
They're going to get run over by a truck when they're crossing the street doing text messages.
For a limited time, the Austrian Mint and SD Bullion are offering you a Silver Philharmonic buy 19, get one free coin deal. Officially issued by this storied 825-year-old European bullion mint. These famous European silver bullion products come packaged complete in protective sealed Austrian mint tubes containing 20 coins apiece, or in bulk sealed Austrian mint cases containing 500 troy ounces in each. These guaranteed 1 troy ounce Austrian Philharmonics are official European legal tender silver coins. Each is comprised with a minimum .999 fine silver bullion content. Austrian Philharmonic bullion coins qualify for silver IRAs, making them an excellent choice for tax-deferred, long-term bullion savings. Discreetly shipped, fully insured to SD Bullion customers' doors and non-bank vaults. Don't delay. This free silver Austrian Philharmonic bullion coin deal will end soon.
Texting has joined the video games from the 90s. And now we're even more a nation distracted. We're even more a nation that's somewhat captured by Facebook. I get told by clients, well, Jim, do you have a Facebook? Why don't you promote your site with Facebook? I said, I don't want to have anything to do with Facebook. They might actually ban me after I develop some kind of a clientele and a little dependence on it for my promotion. They might ban me after it grows. Oh, I don't think that'd happen. So I asked the dumb American, are you aware that Facebook banned all the posts and all the people who were making forewarnings of the Belgian orchestrated terror event in the airport in Brussels, and the ditto in the Nice, France, organized, orchestrated terror event there? Oh, no, I don't know anything about that. They don't know anything about what's important. Are you aware that Soros, I asked him, is funding the Black Lives Matter movement? No, I don't know anything about that. They don't know anything about anything important. It's really quite tragic. We're dumbing down our nation. I got another funny little story. Remember, it was about a year ago, we had the Black Lives Matter, or 2 years ago, Black Lives Matter. Of course they matter. I've got a couple black friends. I keep up with them. One of them is involved in a nice startup business, and he's in Colombia now, and he's got connection with Western Europe, and he's doing great. He's a smart guy. He's a fun guy. When he's here, he visits me. We go out for a couple meals. Okay, I know what's going on with black folk, and they tell me the same thing. They told me after 6 years of Obama, they said, you know, black folks, they feel betrayed. They feel Obama is more like a white guy running the white agenda. He hasn't done shit for black folks. I said, you're right. It took you 6 years to figure that out. It took me about 1. Okay, here's the joke. The Black Lives Matter. Okay, sure they matter. I got a little poster in the email, and it was from one of my clients. I said, Jim, check this out. It's hilarious. It was 2 dogs. They each had a sign. They each had a sign hanging down around their necks. They're sitting dogs. They're both Labradors. One was a golden lab and one was a black lab. And they each had a sign saying Black Labs Matter. And I thought, that's a keeper. That's a keeper. But, you know, I don't try to make fun of any ethnic differences. I don't make any racial jokes or slurs or anything. I was brought up, I had a couple black friends. On my soccer team in high school, we had 3 black guys. They're all on scholarships. So what? They were good guys. Theo, Delbert, I can't remember the third guy's name. Theo died recently. I just got news. They were both athletic, fast, and good guys. Okay, in college it's a segregated society we have in the United States, but when I was in college in the Midwest, I did not have many black friends. The black folks were largely in one dormitory. I didn't make the rules. I didn't set up. I had one friend. Todd. And when I graduated, or when we moved away from the dormitories, I gave Todd my hat. It was a big leather hat, and Todd was always borrowing. And I said, Todd, give me back my hat. Come on, man. and finally I said, just keep it. It's June. We're done with school. You love it. I don't wear it that much. It's just on my show. I know black folks. I don't know a lot of them, but I can relate to them, and they somehow open up to me, and it's nice. It means they trust me. This guy who has the business with Western Europe, living in Colombia now, he's from Texas, and he said to me, Jim, you know, for a white guy, you're pretty nice and pretty level. I said, what do you mean level? You treat me fair. You treat me like a man. I said, other guys don't? No, not really, no. They treat me with suspicion. I said, okay, fine. Well, you're a smart guy. I say to him, and he said, is that why you talk to me? Is that why you treat me well? I said, no, you show me respect too. He didn't have a hotel room one time, and he slept at my place on the floor. We just arranged a little half-ass mattress, and he was good to go in the morning, took his plane ride. So, I don't want to, build myself up, but I try to be fair. I'm fair in the newsletter, and
he doesn't have a clue what's coming either, too, does he, Jim?
No, he does. He's a smart guy. He's a smart guy. I gave him a free subscription. He said, I read it once in a while, but I'm busy, Jim. I'm setting up things. I'm trying to build my business, and it's tough. And now we get more of these foreign tax law things getting in the way. And I'm constantly having to overcome the U.S. government forms. It's bullshit, Jim. It's bullshit. I said, I know it is. I know. They're trying to limit the dollar dumping. That's what they're trying to do. Let me get back to the finance point here. You said that the whole world is dumping dollars, and that's true. If that's the case, and it is the case, then we must explain my most recent incorrect forecast. I have a lot of correct forecasts, and one that's coming right now, two that are coming, is the gold trade note is coming into view, and the Germans are flipping east. And that's happening in a very big way. I made that forecast in 2015, and I said it's going to take 2 or 3 years, and it has. But the stress from dumping has not resulted in a rise in the treasury bond yield. Okay.
Because when people are selling bonds, the price of the bond goes down, interest rates go up accordingly. They're supposed to rise. Right. And in this case, they should be rising much faster because it's the whole world dropping those bonds. So that's what you're talking about right there. Continue.
That should be the case, but instead we have a rally in bonds, and when I had a forecast, I said we're heading toward 3.5% or 4% on the 10-year bond. I showed the chart, but I had a disclaimer in there. I said, but. And it's a big but.
It is.
If Wall Street wants a rally in bonds, all they have to do is create havoc in the stock market. And that's what happened. And that's why we did not get to 3.5, and instead we're working toward 2.5. We're having a bond rally. Okay, so when the world is dumping their treasuries, and oh gosh, they have a new figure that they calculate. It's called the last 12 months. Last 12 months for treasury net sales. Okay, some are buying. Japan is on orders with a gun to their head to continue buying treasuries. But a lot of other nations are selling. If you net them all out and look at the last 12 months total each month, you see that we are in a torrent of dumping of treasuries. If that's the case, how come the Treasury is showing a rally with falling yield? It's because they've put they've shaken the wits out of the U.S. stock market. So a lot of professionals running funds, pensions, mutual funds, they're selling stocks and they're buying treasuries. They may not intend to hold treasuries for a long time, but they're buying the treasuries. But now, apart from the stock market, what is the big factor? Better question. Who's buying treasury bonds? We have a 1.3 trillion in deficits for the U.S. government this year. Where are the buyers? We securitize them with treasuries. Who are the buyers? Okay, if you look, you'll see there are a lot of financial institutions buying. It does not add up to 1.3 trillion. Who are the buyers? I'll tell you who the buyer is. It's the U.S. government itself. And they're using the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and they're using machinery from the interest rate swap derivative. And it relies heavily on the zero-cost feeder system of ultra-low interest rates. And they put some strain on the system by increasing the Fed funds low, we call it short-term interest rates. When you put strain on your zero-cost feeder system, it puts strain on the entire machine. The machine is the interest rate swap derivative. I've done a sample. I don't obviously ask the 50 dumb Americans who I meet in sports bars, do you know what the interest rate swap derivative is? But occasionally I said, do you know what's going on with derivatives? Well, I read about it once in a while. I don't really know. Well, do you know that that's what they use to fabricate a bond purchase? No, I don't know anything about that. Do you know we got like $700 trillion worth of derivatives out there floating as a support foundation for the entire U.S. and Western banking system? No, I read about stuff. I don't really understand any of it, Jim. Sorry, I just don't. Okay, this is very much abstruse, very obscure, very hidden, different, unusual, and not commonly understood. That's the definition of abstruse. It depends upon the free money coming in. Okay, so it's very low interest rate. They can rejigger things in order to make the cost net zero for the feeder system. They're that good. I'm hearing that over 75% of all treasury bonds are being bought by the U.S. government through the interest rate swap machinery derivatives. When foreign countries, it's their central banks. When China, okay, for instance, when Angola receives $10 billion, just a rough figure, for handling their yearly budget, and it's all in treasuries, they sell it in the open market. Who buys it? And there are more buyers than sellers because the rate's coming down, the interest rate, the bond yield's coming down. There's a lot of dumping, but there's a tremendous amount of U.S. government purchase of its own debt. Now, if you look at the financial history in the last 50 years for planet Earth, every single country that bought its own debt saw a currency crisis. The United States is precluding a currency crisis by forcing through sanctions and other means the rest of the world to continue using the dollar in trade, while locally in the United States we're using the interest rate swap derivative to maintain the course. We're buying time. And a lot of clients ask me, Jim, when? Okay, it's a time question. When will this all fracture? And you might be, working your way up to this question yourself. I answer the question, when will this all fracture? When will the dollar experience its currency crisis? When will the United States experience its massive financial troubles? And I say the process began a few months ago for fracture. Now, I'm asked often, well, what do you mean? I didn't hear anything in the news about fracture. I get a lot of questions from bright people who are Hat-Trick Letter subscribers, and they're not noticing the fractures. Here's one. General Electric just got downgraded to BBB bond. That's a fracture. They were considered, when I started this newsletter in 04 and 05, General Electric, not General Motors, General Electric was considered the #1 financial corporation in the United States. They had steady earnings. They were so steady in meeting the analyst estimates that there were rumors and a lot of stories that they were managing their earnings by lowering them a few pennies this quarter, raising them a few pennies next quarter by use of derivatives. I contend that they got bitten by derivatives, and now they're being, not bitten, they're being slammed with a sledgehammer by the U.S. economy. They got downgraded to triple B. And here's some facts about these triple B bonds. There used to be 600 billion, 550, 600 billion back at the Lehman event in triple Bs. You want to take a guess what the volume of triple B bonds in the United States is right now?
I'm sure it's several multiples higher.
It's 2.8 trillion. Okay, I contend that a fracture is coming with U.S. corporate bonds.
Okay.
It's going to reflect on the U.S. bond market in a general sense. And that means it's going to have a shadow impact. Think of a tiger's tail. No, I just saw a movie a few days ago. It was a dinosaur. You know, I like watching Jurassic Park. There's several. The most recent was Super with, I can't think. It's Ron Howard's daughter, Dallas Bryce Howard. Anyway, Bryce Dallas Howard. She's a cutie. She's a redhead. The dinosaur, when it lunged forward to hit a target, might miss, but never pass the opportunity to whip that tail. The tail is part of its structure because it's got a lot of weight in the neck and head and the upper torso. And the tail balances it out so that it can walk and run. The tail is a weapon. Whack! I believe the downgrades from triple B, we now have 2.8 trillion or 2.3 trillion dollars of triple B. They're going to get downgraded. I got two Jackass colleagues who tell me, Jim, I fully expect in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to have downgrades of about $1 trillion of triple B to junk of U.S. corporate bonds. Now, some people might say, well, you know, big deal. It's not treasuries. Well, it is a big deal because these are the pillars upon which the U.S. economy is the platform. And the U.S. government rests with a throne atop that. When these companies suffer the disgrace of going to triple B, they're still in a position to be owned by mutual funds and pension funds. But they drop in their ability to raise more bonds through the bond market, and their issuance dries up. And they must go to the banks and say, we must set up a revolver account. Think of it as a corporate level type household credit card. So they must do the revolver. In other words, what's your payment this month? What's your payment next month? Here's the amount toward principal. Here's your amount toward interest, and the interest is higher. Whereas in the bond market, you float a new bond, you get a very nice low interest rate. And if you run out of money, you float another bond in 4 months, and you get a very nice interest rate. That's all gone. It's all gone when you go to triple B. So we've got a lot of what they call fallen angels. General Electric is the poster boy of fallen angels. They're now in the disgraceful category of triple B. If they go to triple B minus, they suddenly are sold all over the place in mutual funds and pension funds. When you go to triple B, it's like you're going to the waiting room for the funeral parlor. You suffer the disgrace. General Electric stock is down something like 60%. They lost $100 billion in market cap. I wrote it up several months ago on the Hat-Trick Letter. Not much in the news, the market cap loss. It's enormous. If they go to B minus or whatever it's called, the next step down, I put it on the wall. I can't find it. If they go to a lower grade, a junk grade, my guess is that their stock will go down another 50%. If they get downgraded again beyond that, I think they go down another 50%. And then come the questions, my gosh, is it going to go under $1? Is the number one financial corporation in the United States in 2005 going to go not just under 10 now, but under $1? And people say, that doesn't affect the treasuries. Are you kidding me? This is the premier company. That's a fracture. Okay. There's another fracture. I like to focus on domestic and then focus on external. What's going on outside? Well, I had a discussion with The Voice back in July, and he said to me, the Chinese are already paying for Saudi oil in RMB currency. So how long has that been going on? He said, oh, several months. I said, they don't talk about it because bad press for the United States? He said, yeah, well, the impact would be rather severe for the Saudis. They're already under pressure. I said, yeah, they just had $3 trillion of Saudi holdings of treasury bonds stolen by the U.S. government. Now, some people say, well, what do you mean stolen? I said, well, remember in 71 when they set up the petrodollar and the recycle of the treasury surplus, the oil surpluses that the Saudis had? I said, well, a lot of that went into treasuries. And I believe, Paul, I'm not going to call you half dollar. I believe, Paul, that part of the petrodollar scheme that was brokered by the Rockefeller agent named Kissinger, who was appointed to be Treasury Secretary, a Rockefeller agent named Kissinger, I believe the agreement made was, you must put half of your treasuries, you Saudi royals, you must put half your treasuries in the U.S. government because we're going to set up a stabilization fund. And we're going to use that to keep the world safe and keep the financial markets all stable and healthy, and everybody's going to be happy, and you Saudi royals will have your wealth secured. It's not secured. We stole it. We're done with the petrodollar. The petrodollar was dismissed by the East, and it's going to be buried by the East. And it's going to be buried with a big scepter that's golden. So where are we moving? We're going to have to close this. Let me come up with some closing.
And that's coming in 12 to 18 months, Jim.
Oh, I don't know. I think we got this dual universe that's going to be taking shape. I'd like to describe it a bit. Western Europe, England, Great Britain, UK, Scandinavia, most of South America, Latin America, Central America, Canada, they're going to continue with the dollar. Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, they're going to continue with the dollar. They're going to be coerced. Look what we're doing with Iran because they wanted to move away from the dollar. We sanction them and it's very little known. We flood northern Iran with Afghani heroin. We flood it. We make it almost free. We're trying to ruin their society. This is what we do to defend the dollar. It's not honorable. I prefer to go to the gold standard. But as I described, if we back our dollar by gold and we got a $1,300 price, we're going to lose 19,000 tons per year. It's an argument that I'm going to move toward in a minute. It's an argument for 10,000 gold. If we move to 10,000 gold, it's 7 times higher. Instead of, let's call it 18,000 tons, because the math's easier. Instead of losing 18,000 tons, we lose 7 times less, a little under 3,000 tons. That's manageable. We can reindustrialize, manage the trade deficit, bring it down, and maybe the next year it's only 2,000. The gold price rises, the trade deficit drops, and maybe next year it's 1,000. And we're moving toward equilibrium after 3 or 4 years. That's what I want to see happen. Instead of starting another war, stealing another country's gold, threatening to attack Venezuela and endorsing the theft of $200 billion worth of Venezuelan assets. That's not in the news. Okay, this dual universe is going to be forced upon the West. We're going to say to Brazil, keep track with the dollar. Don't get off course, or we'll kill your leaders. Instead of a gold standard, we have war and killing leaders to sustain, with sanctions, the dollar system. It's not honorable, and it's not sustainable. Okay, there's another factor to sustain the dollar. It's Langley itself, our Central Intelligence Agency. Langley has a lot of businesses. Do you think any of them are regulated? No. Okay, what are their businesses? They have a big, big business in narcotics. Papa Bush set it up. Very few people understand. All the objectives of Afghanistan that we heard in the news were phony. Do you remember Condoleezza Rice? She was the NSA director. She said, we're going into Afghanistan to set up an oil pipeline for Chevron. What happened with that? Didn't go anywhere. We're going to Afghanistan because they've got tremendous mineral wealth. We're going to aid with the infrastructure development and the mining and all the capital requirements. And we're going to make Afghanistan one of the richest nations in all of Asia. What happened with that plan? Instead, we built up their heroin business. It went from a couple hundred tons to 1,400 tons under our war on terror. What is the war on terror? It's a smokescreen for building up Langley's heroin business. What's the value of Afghan heroin? $800 billion to $1.2 trillion a year. Who covers the costs? The U.S. government, U.S. military. I've talked as clients to 2 hat-trick letter subscribers, ex-U.S. military. They each told me I was doing a tour of Afghanistan. And I said, could you please tell me, what does the high command tell the grunt soldiers in Afghanistan who are guarding the poppy fields, patrolling hundreds, if not 1,000, U.S. military troops? What do they tell the, what do they tell the troops? What are they doing? What's all this poppy for? It's clearly for heroin. What do they tell the troops? They both said the same thing. Yes, we're making heroin and we're shipping it to China and Russia to wreck their societies. That's a bunch of bullshit. I got a different hat-trick letter client who works and lives at Ramstein, Germany, the NATO base. I said, are we shipping heroin through NATO bases? And he said, yes. German Ramstein and Italian Aviano. Those are the 2 main ports since we lost in Sirlik in Turkey. And I said, what about shipping it to Russia and China? He said, it's all bullshit. Okay, so we're in the heroin business. Langley's entire heroin business is dollar-based. You think they're going to go off the dollar standard?
No.
Okay, Langley has other businesses. Okay, you hear in the news, occasionally the alternative news, that there's $6 trillion in missing Pentagon funds. Where did it go? Well, a lot of it went to Israel, I can assure you, because they are the giant thieves of U.S. weapons. They buy it for scrap metal. I heard that from Cato, my internal source. They steal, like, say, a destroyer, a naval vessel. They buy it for scrap metal. It's a 90% discount, or 95. The metal is a lot cheaper than the finished product. A lot of weapon systems enter the black market, and Langley is the seller. They take it in dollars. They're not going to go off the dollar standard. Langley is also involved with Papa Bush and the whole team in human trafficking. Okay, if you look closely at the United Nations, you see a lot of coordination toward white woman trafficking. It's in the United Nations, which is co-opted by the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay, it's all dollar-based. If you look at the New Jersey hospitals, the Israeli hospitals, and Langley, you see a lot of movement of human organs. It's all dollar-based. I read a story about the forests outside Kiev, 2 years after the launched war in Ukraine. The forests had 2,000 dumped cadavers. It was in the alternative news. What do they have in common? They all had their major organs removed. This is what we do. We create an illicit war. We steal their gold, and we take the cadavers from the war and make human organ trafficking, commerce out of it. The point is, Langley has a lot of dollar-based businesses. I heard from The Voice that there are at least a dozen containers in Greek ports that have nothing but shrink-wrapped $100 bills. Langley not only has dollar-based businesses, they have dollar-based savings accounts that are not in banks. The question, you think Langley will apply pressure to continue the dual universe of the dollar in the West and the Chinese RMB in the East? The answer to me is hell yes. So when people think the dollar's going to rise, and as I used to say, but no longer say for the last year, dollar's going to rise, then rise some more and vanish. No, the dollar's going to rise some more, cause tremendous problems, and forced upon the United States will be a dual universe where the West with all of its allies will use the dollar under coercion by Langley, and the East, including the Pacific Rim, maybe even Japan, big item is Japan, Russia, they're going to use the RMB and the Russian ruble. Now, the Chinese are going to say to the Russians, we'll use your ruble, it's not a problem. And they say, okay, fine. We're going to buy some rubles, we're going to support your ruble, we're going to use it in commerce, but it'll all wash out because we're all converting RMB and ruble to gold. Okay, the initial pass will be ruble and RMB, and when it comes through the wash, you're going to have gold bars in the banking system in Russia and China. I was shocked when I read something recently. The strongest economy in the world today, right now, is Russia, despite the sanctions. They're not really having a big detrimental effect. They're having an effect, but they're working around it. Do any Americans realize that the number one agricultural export nation in the world is Russia? Does anybody realize that in the United States?
No, they
Well,
don't.
after seeing this interview, you're going to be one of the very few that understand that. And they're selling in rubles. They're converting into converting into gold. They're converting all their dollars. They don't have any more treasury bonds. They're converting to gold. Okay, I got another story from The Voice. This is about 6 months ago, a little before Christmas. There was a big story that the Russians sold their final $48 billion worth of treasuries and dumped them on the market. And The Voice wrote me and said, Jim, here's what really happened. I wouldn't call it a dumping, but it has the same effect for a net basis. What they did was they informed all the Western European banks that the Russian accounts have 40 billion in treasuries, and they wanted loans 1-for-1 against the treasuries. They wanted to borrow $40 billion, and with the $40 billion, they bought $40 billion worth of gold. So they're net zero in the Western banks without having sold anything. They borrowed the money. The United States probably set up dollar swaps of 40 billion in volume, and the Russians took it and bought gold. They're net zero. They don't give a shit what happens to those banks. If the bank goes down, they don't care. The bank goes down, the debt goes away. The debt is handled maybe in a secondary market, liquidation market. Maybe the bank can take the debt and turn a profit on it with the liquidation. Okay. One of the biggest events in the United States recently was a General Electric bond downgrade. One of the biggest events in Western Europe was the Deutsche Bank bond downgrade, and their stock's been under $10 for a long time. It used to be $160. Their Deutsche Bank stock is down over 90%. General Electric, ditto. Okay, these are your standard bearers. And now you have, okay, let me finish more on the dual universe because I got to mention the Italian story is wonderful. The dual universe will continue. I apologize, I got a very tickly nose. The dual universe will be sustained by China. China is getting all of its trade partners to work in RMB. They're getting all the signatories for Belt and Road Initiative. I just read that they've got rock solid 1 trillion in active projects, and they got pledges for 5 trillion more. It's all non-dollar. And all the commerce from setting up, say, a Pakistan gigantic port facility will not be in dollars. The big bridge that they're constructing in Thailand, it's going to be one of the world's biggest bridges ever. It will enable more commerce with parts of Southeast Asia that weren't so accessible, but now it's going to be just quick truck passage. The commerce will not be in dollars. Furthermore, a lot of the funding for the Belt and Road Initiative projects sponsored by China will be in dumped treasury bonds. Indirect exchange. Thailand wants the bridge. Chinese bank funds the project. They provide the treasuries. The project contractors in Thailand are organized, and they're paid in treasuries, and they dump them on the market. The whole East is dumping treasuries. They're doing so for infrastructure projects, for a lot of different things. Okay, and the United States can't stop it. We can't say, oh, we're going to do trade sanctions against China and all of its partners. Oh, really? And your trade goes down to zero, United States? I don't think so. So we're picking on patsies. We're picking on Russia. We're picking on Iran. Russia is not working. Germany worked around the Russian sanctions by doing something very simple and very clever. They bought up an old Russian plant, retooled it, got it up and running in 6 to 8 months, started shipping product for Russian client consumption. Russian built, Russian subsidiary of Germany, output to the Russian client, no violation of sanctions. United States stepped in and said, oh yeah, gosh, that'll take 3 or 4 years to get up and running. No, you underestimate the savvy and ability of the Germans. Up and running in 6 to 8 months, and in 2 years, almost at full capacity. They did it for dozens and dozens of little plants. Now the Germans are saying, we want Nord Stream 2. We want the Gazprom natural gas. And we don't want to buy LNG, liquefied natural gas, from the United States for 50% higher price. Excuse me, we'd rather buy it from the Russians. And the United States steps in and says, well, we're going to sanction the German financial companies involved. We're going to sanction the German construction companies involved. And the EU court stepped in and said, not legitimate. The Russians and the Germans have a deal. The Germans want it. It makes sense for Germans. It makes sense for the German economy. It's a cheaper source of energy. All of Europe is concluding that Gazprom is a more sensible, cheaper course of action for commerce. And just last week, I got a photo of it in the hat trick letter for March. The last tie-in took place for Turkish Stream. We tried to kill their leader, Erdogan. The Russians prevented it, and now have a new ally, a former NATO. Well, they're still NATO. The Russians captured a NATO nation. And if you think that it's business as usual for all the fighter aircraft at Incirlik Air Force Base, you're just a dumbass. There is something that, again, this Rammstein guy pointed out. He said, Jim, you need to be aware of something regarding Incirlik. This has got to be a phase out. There are still some U.S. Air Force fighter aircraft in Incirlik, in Turkey, and they depend on the U.S. parts, U.S.-made parts. He said, it'll be a few years before we're out of Incirlik. And I said, sounds like Incirlik is 2 Air Force bases. One is Turkey, and one is the United States and Germany. And he said, yeah, that's pretty much it. Watch as over time, passage of time, the Turkish part will push out the American part, and Incirlik will be 100%, but it's not 100%. It doesn't work that way. He said it works in percentages, about half-half now. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what I was told. Okay, now, concluding remark, China is capturing Europe. Remember last year, I think it was September, there was the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. Okay, a lot of executives from European companies attended. The United States told them it's a good idea not to go. They told the United States, screw off. They went to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. I dispute the name Davos Economic Forum. There's no corporate heads there except bankers. Davos, Switzerland is an elite banker barbecue where I believe they got children in the basement for midnight ritual fun. They got an open bar. They probably have a lot of very good drugs. I don't hear of a single, in all my years of the 14 plus years of the hat trick letter, I don't remember a single commercial deal signed at the Davos Economic Forum. All I hear is banking concepts, banking ideas, banking rules discussed, and banking matters. That's all I hear. So the Economic Forum of St. Petersburg is the new economic forum. The French attended last year too, and they signed over 20 billion euros worth of deals with Russian firms. During the Russian sanctions, European companies signed oodles and oodles of billion-dollar deals with Russian firms during the Russian sanctions. So, the Economic Forum of St. Petersburg is the new economic forum. In fact, it's the only big economic forum, and Putin attends it and sprinkles Russian holy water on it, where it burns all the Satanist Western corporate leaders' faces. That's a big statement I just made. I've had numerous comments sent to me, few from Canada, where they observed satanic rituals by their corporate leaders, early this morning or late at night, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so China bought Greek ports in the last 2 years. The Greeks were looking to sell their prized assets, remember? The Greeks were objecting to the Germans sacking control through collateral seizure from debt failure. The Germans were seizing assets. And there are only so many you can seize to cover tens of billions of euros. I mean, the port facility might have been worth 2, okay? You take over an entire string of shopping malls and you might have 1.5. So how do you seize like 50 billion? It's very difficult. So the Greeks were looking to sell some assets, gain partnerships, like sell 40% interest. I don't honestly know, but I believe the Chinese own more than controlling interest of the Piraeus port. And now they went on a shopping tour to Italy. And I included this in the hat trick letter for March. It was a dynamo story because the U.S. government tried to influence the Italian prime minister and vice prime minister not to entertain any deals with China. And the Italians said, this will not interfere with our alliance with the United States. This will not interfere or undermine our arrangements with NATO. So we will proceed. And now on the table are memorandum of understanding to buy up to 4 ports. The 4 ports are Trieste, Ravenna, Genoa, and Palermo, Sicily. And I'm not an expert in the geography of Italy. I don't know. I think Genoa, Ravenna, I'm not sure. I think they're all on the Adriatic coast. Now, if they're smart, they would have gotten one on the other coast. The coast was Sardinia. But the point is, they signed a deal amidst U.S. objections. And the deal will proceed, I believe, because the Italians have their own vested interest. In the same statement that says they're going to proceed, the Italian leaders are saying, we want Italy to be a vital port for Chinese trade that affects the UE economy. They're going to be rivaling Greece, and it'll be good for the Italian economy. We're slowly seeing key nations in the European Union move toward the West, move toward China and the East. We call it flipping east. Germany is flipping east. They're fed up with the United States trying to run their country. They're a vassal state and they know it, and they're trying to cut this, trying to change certain contractual obligations where it's institutionalized their vassal state status. And the Nord Stream 2 deal, I think, is going to be critical in fracturing some of the control lines from Washington to Berlin. But the Italians are so defiant. I love the Italians. When I was in Boston before I left, I had 3 best friends who were Italian. They all had Italian-sounding names. They're fun guys. We Irish like the Italians. We're both outspoken. We're hot-blooded. We're emotional. We never just, oh, well, that's okay. No, I don't like that. We stand up for ourselves. And the Italians are on record 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We're not going to let the EU Commission do to Italy what they did to Greece. So they're setting up commerce and they're trying to improve their economy. I believe Italians are going to break loose and revert to the lira currency. And it's going to cause some very serious problem because it's not just a matter of one country exiting. The entire euro currency must be rejiggered and all the contracts must be rewritten because there are, I think, 13 members and they all have their ratios and it's all in contract. It all has to be rewritten. I once thought it would be a simple matter. It's not. I got corrected. I like to learn. Paul, I like to learn.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Willie, editor of the Hat Trick Letter. What we're listening to is that the death of the dollar is written in stone. In the meantime, we're seeing the rise of a dual universe. And one of these universes is on the rise. One of them is in decline. And we'll let the listener figure out which one that is. Jim Willie, parting thoughts?
The dual universe is going to have a gradual encroachment by the East into the West to install the gold standard. And I believe Europe is critical. Europe is far more important than Brazil and Venezuela. They're important in Latin America, to be sure, but Europe is the key. If Europe begins to flip more and more east, and the Frankfurt RMB hub is developed for bond issuance and currency trading, we're going to see even more impetus. If we see German construction and finance firms involved in Belt and Road Initiative projects, it's going to accelerate. The Chinese are going to eventually capture Europe. Europe is starting to hate the United States. Hate our influence, hate our orders, hate our sanctions. You cannot sanction the Germans. You cannot do that. And if you do, you're going to have an acceleration during this dual universe phase toward the gold implementation in the West. I think the United States is going to be last in the gold standard. And we're at the risk of slipping into the third world. Our infrastructure is now very close to third world in description. So dual universe is going to be the rule of the day while the gold standard makes its impact, first with the gold trade note with oil shipments and payments, then in shipments for grain and hard items like cement, lumber, coal, metals, and then in international contract. The gold trade note will make the big inroad and implement the early stages of the gold standard. And the United States will be forced into this game in order to assure import supply. Because the exporters from other countries, those who export from their country to the United States, are going to demand the gold trade note. They're going to start refusing the U.S. Treasury bill. And it's going to be a big, hot dispute because we're going to pressure them. And we're going to do strange things like harm their economy, harm their financial markets, and maybe even target their leaders to get them to accept the Treasury bill in trade. This is how it's evolving. You got tons of precedent.
There you have it, folks. The dollar will not go down quietly. Jim Willie, thank you for joining us again. We welcome you back on Metals and Markets, Friday, March 29th, 2019. Thank you, Golden Jackass.
Okay, it was a pleasure.